The night was calm in Portland, the kind of quiet that feels both peaceful and a little lonely. The rain had been falling since evening, tapping gently on the windows of Emma's small wooden cottage. She lived on the edge of town, surrounded by tall trees and soft mist. It wasn't a fancy place, but it was hers, filled with books, candles, and the smell of vanilla that came from the candles she lit every night before bed. Emma had always loved nights like this, nights where she could hear the wind, sip her tea, and think. But that night, something about the silence felt heavier than usual, as if the air itself was waiting for something to happen. Emma sat at her desk by the fireplace, writing in her notebook. She wrote stories, letters she would never send, and thoughts she was too shy to say out loud. It was her way of keeping herself company. Her cat, Daisy, slept near the fire, purring softly. The clock ticked toward midnight, and Emma's eyes began to grow heavy. The rain outside had grown softer, the thunder long gone, replaced by the gentle hum of crickets. She yawned, stretched her arms, and decided it was time to go to bed. She got up, put her notebook away, and turned off the lamp. The house was dark except for the glowing light of the fireplace. She walked to the door, meaning to lock it like she always did, but just as she reached for the handle, Daisy meowed from behind her, startling her a little. She turned around, smiled, and said softly, "All right, good night then," forgetting entirely about the door. She walked upstairs to her room, wrapped herself in a blanket, and drifted into sleep as the clock softly struck 12. Outside, the rain continued. The wind blew gently, pushing against the slightly open front door. It creaked just a little, enough for the cool air to slip inside. The sound was faint, so faint that even Daisy didn't wake up. The door, left unlatched, moved with the rhythm of the wind. The room smelled of wet earth and fresh rain. Emma dreamed that night of a knock she never answered, of footsteps that stopped at her porch, and of someone standing outside in the cold looking for warmth. The dream felt real, almost too real. She woke once, confused by the sound of something, maybe the fire crackling, maybe the floor creaking, but her eyes were too heavy to stay open. She turned on her side and fell back asleep, unaware of the quiet shift that had already happened inside her home. By morning, the rain had stopped. A soft, golden light filled the cottage. Emma stretched, brushed her hair back, and smiled sleepily at the sound of birds outside. She got out of bed and went downstairs, thinking only about making coffee and feeding Daisy, but as she reached the bottom step, she noticed something odd. The air in the house felt cold, much colder than usual. Then she saw it. The front door was slightly open, swinging gently. Her heart skipped. She froze for a second, trying to remember if she had locked it last night. She walked closer, the wooden floor creaking under her feet. When she looked down, she saw small drops of water leading across the floor, like footprints, faint but clear. Her mind raced. Someone could have come in. She glanced toward the fireplace, where the ashes from last night's fire were still warm. And then she saw a man's coat hanging neatly on the back of a chair. It was dark brown, wet from the rain, and it definitely wasn't hers. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She felt a mix of fear and confusion. Her first instinct was to step back, to run for her phone, but something about the scene stopped her. Everything looked calm. There was no sign of damage, no mess, no broken things. It was as if someone had come in quietly, politely even, and decided to leave their coat behind. She turned slowly, scanning the room. The fireplace had been cleaned, the kettle was on the counter, and 2 mugs sat beside it. One empty, one half full. Her pulse quickened. She knew she hadn't made tea for anyone. She reached for the mug with a shaky hand, touching it lightly. It was still warm. That's when she heard it, the faintest sound. A soft movement coming from the corner of the room. Her eyes darted toward the sound, and there he was. A man tall, maybe in his early 30s, with dark hair that fell messily over his forehead, sitting quietly by the fire, as if he had been waiting. He looked up, startled, eyes wide, as if realizing how strange this must look. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the gentle crackle of the fireplace and the faint drip of water from his coat onto the floor. Emma's voice finally broke the silence. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone half fearful, half curious. The man stood up quickly, raising his hand slightly in apology. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice calm but tired. "The storm got bad last night. I was walking home and saw your door open. I thought maybe someone needed help. I knocked, but no one answered. I came in to check, and then I must have fallen asleep by the fire. I didn't mean to scare you." Emma stared, trying to process his words. His clothes were damp, his shoes muddy, but there was something honest in his face. The kind of honesty that's hard to fake. He looked embarrassed more than anything. "You stayed here all night?" she asked softly. He nodded. "I know how it sounds. I should have left. I'm sorry. It was cold, and the door was open. I didn't want to take anything, I promise." Emma hesitated, her hand still on the mug. The situation was strange, yes, but something about him didn't feel threatening. He looked like someone who'd had a long night, someone who didn't expect kindness but hoped for it anyway. Finally, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You could have just closed the door, you know," she said quietly, small smile tugging at her lips despite her confusion. He smiled back sheepishly. "Yeah, I probably should have." For a moment, they both just stood there, unsure what to say next. The morning light streamed through the open door, falling across his face. He looked like someone who belonged anywhere but there, yet somehow it didn't feel wrong that he was. Emma picked up the other mug from the counter and handed it to him. "Well," she said softly, "since you're already here, you might as well stay for breakfast." He blinked, surprised, then smiled. A real smile this time, gentle and warm. "That's kind of you," he said. "I'm Noah." "Emma," she replied. And that was how it began, with a forgotten door, a stormy night. And two strangers who didn't yet know that a simple mistake was about to change both their lives. The morning light made everything look softer than it felt. Emma stood by the door, her thoughts racing, trying to understand how a stranger had ended up asleep near her fireplace. Noah, that was his name, looked uneasy, like someone caught in a situation he didn't want to be in. His white shirt was still damp from the rain, his hair slightly messy, and his eyes carried the tiredness of someone who hadn't rested in days. Emma crossed her arms, still unsure if she should be angry or grateful. "You really thought it was a good idea to walk into a stranger's house?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Noah gave a small apologetic smile. "Honestly, no. But when I saw the door open, I thought someone might be in trouble. Then the storm got worse, and I didn't have anywhere to go. I only meant to stay for a few minutes. I guess the warmth got to me." His voice was calm, respectful, and even though the whole situation was unusual, there was something genuine about the way he spoke. He didn't look like a man with bad intentions. He looked tired, worn out. Someone just trying to make it through the night. Emma sighed. "You could have at least left a note," she said, half joking. He chuckled quietly. "I would have, but I didn't want to waste your paper." For a moment, the tension faded. Emma glanced at the coat hanging on her chair. It was carefully placed there, almost as if he had treated her home with care while she slept. That detail, small as it was, softened her suspicion. She motioned toward the table. "Sit," she said. "You look like you haven't eaten in days." He hesitated. "I should go, really? You've already been kind enough." "Sit," she repeated firmly. "You're not walking out hungry." Noah smiled slightly and sat down, grateful. As Emma poured him some coffee, Daisy the cat jumped onto the table, sniffing at his sleeve before curling up beside him. "Guess she approves," Emma said, hiding a smile. "I'll take that as a good sign," Noah replied. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the soft crackle of the fire and the clinking of cups. Emma kept stealing quick glances at him, curious. There was something about Noah that drew her in. Maybe it was the calm way he spoke, or the sadness hiding behind his tired smile. He looked like someone who had seen too much and carried too much inside. Finally, Emma asked, "So where were you headed last night?" "Nowhere specific," Noah said, stirring his coffee. "I was passing through town. I take photos for magazines, places, people, moments that tell stories. I've been on the road for weeks. He paused, eyes distant. Sometimes I forget what home even feels like. Emma watched him quietly. She could tell that he wasn't just talking about travel. His words had the weight of heartbreak in them, the kind that comes from losing something you never expected to lose. Sounds lonely, she said softly. He gave a small nod. It is, sometimes. She understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. Emma had built her little cottage as an escape after a painful breakup 2 years ago. Since then, she had learned to live alone, to find peace in silence. But lately, that silence had started to feel less like peace and more like emptiness. And now, out of nowhere, here was a stranger who seemed to understand that same quiet ache as the rain outside began to fade. The air in the cottage grew warmer. Noah looked around, admiring the small space filled with books and candles. "You live here alone?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Just me and Daisy. It's quiet, but I like it that way." He nodded thoughtfully. "It suits you." Emma tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "You seem like someone who appreciates peace. Someone who listens more than she speaks." She smiled faintly. "You read people often." "It's part of my job," he said with a light laugh. "Every photograph is a story. You learn to see beyond what's in front of you." There was something gentle about the way he said it, and for a moment Emma forgot how strange the situation had started. She looked at him differently now, not as a stranger, but as someone whose life had brushed against hers by accident, maybe even for a reason. The clock struck 10. The rain had stopped completely, and the sunlight peeked through the windows, painting the room gold. Noah stood, slipping on his coat. "Thank you for the breakfast," he said, smiling, "and for not throwing me out." Emma folded her arms, pretending to sound stern. "You're lucky you didn't steal my cat." He laughed softly. "She wouldn't leave even if I tried." As he reached the door, he paused, turning to face her one last time. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "you have a beautiful home. It feels safe." Emma looked at him for a moment, unsure why those simple words made her chest tighten. "Thank you," she said. "Safe is a rare feeling these days." He nodded, his hand resting on the doorknob. "I'll remember to knock next time." "Next time?" she asked, raising a brow. Noah smiled, a glimmer of warmth in his tired eyes. "Well, unless you plan to lock the door this time." Emma hesitated, then smiled softly. "Maybe I'll forget again." They both laughed, but beneath that laugh was something unspoken, a connection neither of them had expected. He stepped outside, the air cool and fresh after the rain. Emma watched as he walked down the small path that led away from her house. He didn't look back, but she found herself standing at the door long after he was gone, as if her heart hadn't realized it yet. When she finally turned back into the house, everything looked the same chair, the same fireplace, the same quiet. But something in her had shifted. The room didn't feel as empty as it used to. It felt touched, changed in a way she couldn't explain. She sat back down at her writing desk, opened her notebook, and stared at the blank page. Her pen hovered above it before she wrote a single line. "Sometimes the door you forget to close is the one fate walks through." Emma smiled to herself. She didn't know if she would ever see Noah again. But she couldn't shake this strange feeling that this wasn't the end of their story. Maybe he had walked into her life by mistake, or maybe, just maybe, she had left that door open for a reason she hadn't understood until now. Outside, the world was quiet again. The sun glowed through the wet leaves, and Daisy jumped into Emma's lap, purring softly. She looked at the open door, hesitated, and then closed it gently. This time, but left the lock undone, somewhere deep inside. She hoped fate might find its way in again. The next few days passed quietly, but Emma couldn't stop thinking about Noah. His face, his voice, his calm smile, they had left an unexpected mark on her heart. She tried to write, but every time she picked up her pen, her thoughts wandered back to that morning when he had sat near her fireplace, dripping wet, and yet somehow had brought warmth into her house. It was strange, she thought. How someone could appear out of nowhere and change the rhythm of her days without even trying. A week later, on a Sunday morning, she walked to the local cafe in town. It was her usual routine, a cup of black coffee, a croissant, and a few quiet hours of reading. But when she entered, her steps froze. Sitting near the window, camera in hand, was Noah. He looked up almost instantly, as if he had sensed her there. Their eyes met, and he smiled, that same gentle smile that had stayed in her mind all week. "Emma," he said, standing to greet her. "I was hoping I'd see you again." She smiled nervously. "I thought you were just passing through." "I was," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "But this town? It's peaceful. I decided to stay for a few days, take some photos, maybe finish a story I've been working on." They sat together, the conversation flowing easily. It surprised Emma how natural it felt to talk to him, like they had known each other for years. He told her about his travels, the small towns he'd visited, the faces he'd photographed, and the quiet moments that made him fall in love with life again and again. Emma listened closely, fascinated by the way he spoke. There was poetry in his words, soft sadness in his eyes that made her heart ache. When he asked about her, she hesitated at first, but soon found herself opening up. She told him about her writing, how she had once dreamed of publishing a book, and how heartbreak had pushed her into isolation. She explained how she found comfort in small things, candlelight, the sound of rain, the smell of coffee in the morning. Noah listened carefully, his attention warm and sincere. "You write about people?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said, "but mostly about feelings, the ones people don't say out loud." He smiled softly. "That's the best kind." For the first time in a long while, Emma laughed. Not the polite kind she gave strangers, but a real one, the kind that reaches the eyes. It felt good. It felt like sunlight after a long storm. They spent hours talking. Noah showed her a few of his photos. A street musician in New Orleans, a mother and child at a train station, an old man feeding pigeons in Central Park. Each photo told a quiet story, full of emotion. "Photography is like freezing honesty," he said. "Sometimes I capture things I don't even understand until later." Emma nodded. "Writing's the same. You spill your heart before you even realize what it's trying to say." By evening, they walked back toward the cottage together. The sky was painted orange and pink, and the cool breeze carried the scent of pine. Noah stopped midway on the path and raised his camera. "Hold still," he said. "The light's perfect," Emma laughed. "You're not taking my picture?" "Why not?" he asked, smiling. "You look like a story waiting to be told." She rolled her eyes but stood still anyway. The shutter clicked softly. He lowered the camera and looked at the picture for a moment before showing her. "See? Beautiful, not perfect, just real." Something about the way he said it made her heart flutter. She turned away, pretending to focus on the horizon. "You're good with words for someone who takes pictures," she teased. "And you're good at hiding feelings for someone who writes them," he replied gently. She didn't answer. She just smiled and kept walking. When they reached her house, the air between them felt different, softer, heavier, filled with something unspoken. He hesitated at the door, glancing at her like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. "Do you want to come in?" she asked quietly. He shook his head with a small smile. "No, not tonight. I've already invaded your home once, remember?" "That was my fault," she said. "I left the door open," he chuckled. "Maybe some doors are meant to be left open." Her heart skipped. She didn't know why such simple words could make her chest ache. He started to walk away, but before he did, he turned back. "Thank you for the coffee." "And the company." "You're welcome," she said softly. "Good night, Noah. Good night, Emma." When he disappeared down the road, she stood at the door for a long time, staring into the dark. The wind carried the faint sound of his footsteps fading away. And for a reason she couldn't explain, she missed him already. Over the next week, Noah became a part of her days. They met for coffee, walked by the riverside, and talked about life, dreams, and everything in between. Each conversation pulled them closer. Not through grand gestures, but through quiet understanding. Emma found herself looking forward to his texts, his laughter, the way he noticed small details, like how she always tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. One evening, they sat on a bench near the water. The sunset reflected across the surface, turning everything gold. Noah handed her a small photograph, a picture of her from that first day, standing under the fading light. "I developed it today," he said. "I hope you don't mind." Emma stared at it, speechless. The photo was simple, her standing with the wind brushing her hair, eyes soft, lost in thought. But somehow he had captured something she hadn't seen in herself for years. Peace. It's beautiful. She whispered, "So are you," he said quietly. The words hung in the air, gentle but powerful. She didn't reply. Instead, she looked at him, really looked, and realized how much he had changed her in such a short time. He made her feel seen again. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the night wrapped around them. Emma felt a strange mix of warmth and fear. Falling for someone again scared her. But being near Noah felt natural. Like breathing. When he stood to leave, she walked him to the road. He smiled, that same kind smile that had drawn her in from the start. "Next time," he said softly, "remember to close your door at midnight." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I won't." Noah laughed, shaking his head. "You're going to get me in trouble." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," she said quietly. He looked at her for a moment, eyes soft but searching, like he wanted to say something more but chose silence instead. Then he walked away, leaving her with the cool night air and a heart that suddenly didn't feel so lonely anymore. When she went inside, she stood by the door, her hand on the handle, remembering his words. Maybe some doors are meant to be left open. She smiled to herself and whispered into the quiet. "Then let this one stay open." And she left it that way, just a little, enough for the night breeze to find its way in, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and the memory of him. Weeks passed since that golden evening by the river. The air had turned colder, the leaves darker, and the sky often wore a quiet gray. Life in Emma's cottage returned to its soft rhythm. Mornings with coffee and candlelight, afternoons of writing, and evenings spent listening to the rain. Yet everything felt different now. Even silence carried his name. Noah, the stranger who had entered her home by accident, yet somehow left his presence in every corner of it. She didn't see him for several days after their last walk. Maybe he had gone back to traveling, she thought. He was a wanderer, after all, a man who lived with his camera and stories, not someone who belonged to one place. Still, every time the clock struck midnight, Emma found herself glancing at the door. It had become a quiet habit. She never left it wide open, but she never locked it completely either. A part of her, small but stubborn, hoped that maybe, just maybe, he'd find his way back. One rainy night, she sat by the window, watching droplets race down the glass. The sound was soft and rhythmic, almost comforting. Daisy purred in her lap, and a candle flickered beside her. The world outside was still and silver. She sighed, whispered to herself, maybe that chapter's closed, and reached for her notebook. But just as her pen touched the paper, there was a faint sound, a knock. It was so gentle she almost thought she imagined it. Then it came again, clearer this time. Her heart skipped. She stood slowly, her mind a blur of disbelief and hope. The rain had grown heavier, thunder rolling in the distance. She walked to the door and opened it. There he was. Noah stood in the doorway, rain clinging to his hair and jacket, his camera bag slung over his shoulder. His eyes were tired but bright, and that familiar smile tugged at the corners of his lips. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the rain falling between them. Emma finally found her voice. "You came back." He nodded, water dripping from his coat. "I was passing through again," he said softly. "But I couldn't just pass by. Not without seeing you." She stared at him, torn between relief and confusion. "You disappeared," she said quietly. "I thought you left for good." "I did," he admitted. "Or at least I tried. But some places don't let you go. Some people don't either." Her eyes softened. "You're soaked. Come in before you catch a cold." He smiled gratefully and stepped inside. The warmth of the fire greeted him instantly. He took off his coat and placed it once again neatly on the chair. "Feels like déjà vu," he said, laughing under his breath. Emma couldn't help but laugh too. "Except this time, I opened the door myself." They sat near the fire, just like that first night, though this time the air between them was different, familiar, peaceful. She poured him tea and watched as he warmed his hands around the mug. "So," she asked, "what brought you back?" Noah looked into the fire, his expression thoughtful. "After I left, I went to Seattle for a job. It was fine, busy, loud, full of people. But I kept thinking about this place, about the quiet, about you. I realized that not every story is meant to be photographed. Some are meant to be lived." Her chest tightened at his words. She didn't know what to say, so she just looked at him, really looked, and saw that same gentleness she had felt from the start. The man who had walked into her house as a stranger now looked like someone she'd known all her life. They talked for hours, just like before, about little things, books, music, dreams. Emma told him how she'd started writing again, how her stories felt lighter now. Noah smiled when she said that. "Maybe you just needed the right inspiration," he said teasingly. She blushed slightly, lowering her eyes. "Maybe I did." The rain outside softened to a whisper. The fire crackled, filling the silence between their words. Noah leaned back, watching her. "Do you ever wonder," he said quietly, "what would have happened if you had closed the door that night?" Emma smiled faintly. "I think about it all the time. And I think," she said, looking at him, "that some mistakes aren't mistakes at all." Their eyes met, and for a long moment neither spoke. It wasn't a loud or dramatic moment, but it carried a deep kind of peace. The kind that comes when two people finally stop running from what they feel. Noah reached into his bag and pulled out a photograph. "I took this the morning I left," he said. It was a picture of her cottage, the door slightly open, sunlight streaming through it, a single chair by the fire. "I didn't know why I took it then, but now I think I do. It felt like home." Emma looked at the photo, her eyes glistening. "You found something here, didn't you?" He nodded. "I did, but only because you forgot to close the door." She laughed softly, her voice trembling just a little. "Then maybe I'll never close it again." The clock struck midnight. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the world washed and quiet. Noah stood, walked to the door, and opened it just enough for the cool night air to drift in. He turned to her, eyes soft. "Sometimes the right people walk in when we least expect it," he said. Emma stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "And sometimes they stay." Noah smiled, that same gentle, honest smile she had fallen for without even realizing it. "If you'll let me," he said. She didn't answer with words. She just looked at him, her eyes saying everything her heart already knew. He reached out, taking her hand carefully as if he was afraid she might pull away. But she didn't. The fire flickered behind them, the scent of rain lingering in the air. The night felt endless, quiet, and full of meaning. Two people who had once been strangers now stood at the doorway, the same one that had brought them together, no longer wondering if it was luck or fate. It didn't matter anymore. Emma finally spoke. "You should know," she said softly. "I'm terrible at remembering to close doors." Noah smiled, his thumb brushing over her hand. "Good," he whispered. "Then maybe I'll never have to knock again." And just like that, something unspoken settled between them, not a promise, not a confession. Just the gentle understanding that some hearts find their way home in the quietest of ways. That night, Emma didn't close the door. She left it slightly open, the fire still glowing, the air still carrying the scent of rain. As she sat with Noah, listening to the soft rhythm of the night, she realized that love doesn't always arrive with a plan. Sometimes it comes with the sound of rain, a forgotten lock, and the courage to open the door again. Outside, the moonlight touched the cottage roof, silver and still. Inside, warmth filled the room, not just from the fire, but from two souls who had finally found where they belonged. And from that night on, whenever the clock struck midnight, the door of Emma's little cottage never stayed completely shut.